everyone, and welcome to the Preschool Mindfulness Summit. I'm really excited to introduce our next guest, Jody Johnston Pawel. She is from ParentsToolshop.com, and she has provided us with a lot of great things today. She's giving you a discount coupon so you can get the Taming Temper Tantrums resource at no charge, which is very generous. And there's also a quiz that you can learn, practice what you've heard today and see what you picked up. Jody has a book called The Parents Toolshop Jumpstart Guide, 5 Easy Steps to Effectively Respond to Any Parenting Challenge, which sounds very interesting. I will have a link to that book if you're interested. And today her topic is the mindfulness way to tame temper tantrums. So I know our viewers are going to be really excited to learn from you. Thank you so much for coming, Jody.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Helen. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's start with temper tantrums. What age do kids usually start having these famous tantrums in the toddler or
the famous tantrums?
Yeah.
I think most people can almost expect at some point or another to experience them during the toddler years. Because, during those toddler years, first of all, they don't have a lot of language. Right. They don't have a lot of emotional control. A lot of self-control in terms of handling stress. So when they get frustrated or they don't really know how to get their needs met, rather than being able to verbalize that in an appropriate way, it comes out through their behavior. And they don't understand. You can try to explain why they can't have something, and that doesn't always make sense to them. So I think that's probably the most common age that we see it. But it doesn't preclude even adults. I'm sure we can all think of adults who throw tantrums when they don't get what they want or they don't get enough attention. So it is actually one of those things that if someone never develops the skills or they get a payoff for the behavior, then you can see it actually continue well beyond the toddler years.
Right. Okay. But what age? We all know those people. Yeah. But what age do children typically kind of stop having those regular tantrums?
Usually by about 7 or 8. It's still actually very common, even with very verbal children, even at age 5 and 6, to occasionally have maybe either a meltdown, or if they're tired or they're hungry or they don't get what they want. And I have a 5.5-year-old granddaughter who's extremely verbal, very, very intelligent, very eloquent in the way that she speaks, way off the charts in a lot of ways. But she still has her moments, especially with transitions. There's certain things that are triggers for tantrums, and we can get into some of those as we discuss more. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about some of maybe the myths and misconceptions that we might have around temper tantrums.
Yeah. So I think one is that, first of all, that you can expect to have children with tantrums. So not all children do have tantrums. I think some personality traits lend themselves more to it. Another big myth is if your child's having a tantrum, you should just ignore it. Right. And ignoring will work in some kinds of tantrum situations, and other times it'll actually escalate the situation. When I am teaching, I teach hundreds of thousands of parents, and I also teach foster parents, and I'll always say, like, what have you all heard you're supposed to do? Ignore it, they all say in unison. And what happens when you ignore it? It gets worse. And that's true. And so by the end of our talk today, folks will know exactly what to do so that it does, quote, work.
Yes, that's good. We need to know these things. So tell us, you mentioned a few things like hunger or tiredness that might be causes of temper tantrums. So just tell us a bit more about what some other causes might be.
Yeah, so not all tantrums are alike. In the system that I teach, which is called the Universal Blueprint for Parenting Success, and you can use it in whether you're working with children or living with children, because I know we have some early childhood educators and teachers here. The whole key is that it's not just about stopping the behavior that's on the surface, it's about understanding what's driving the behavior underneath. Kind of like, instead of treating the symptom, you get at the cure. And so not all tantrums are alike. So on the surface, tantrums can look very similar. the flailing and the yelling and the screaming and all of that. But different things trigger it. And so because they have different causes, your approach needs to be a little bit different. So there's 4 major causes, kind of 4 major types of tantrums.
Sure.
The first one I just kind of think of as, it's more like the child's frustrated about something and they can't get, not that they can't get what they want. It'd be like a toddler trying to make a dog out of Play-Doh and they can't get it and they're getting frustrated and they just, I can't do this, and they kind of, well, in that situation, you're going to feel kind of bad for the child. You're going to be feeling kind of empathetic. And maybe to acknowledge feelings, to pay attention, not ignoring it.
Yeah.
But to pay attention, acknowledge their frustration, maybe do a little bit of problem solving. That is frustrating. Play-Doh's hard to work with. What do you think you could do? Or what do you think a dog would look like? That kind of an approach, like any other, I'm really frustrated and I can't deal with my own emotions, would be appropriate.
Right.
Which is really different from if you have a child who is, the second type is what I call medical meltdowns, which just means it has a more physiological component. So this could be, you've been shopping all day long. Your child is tired, they're hungry. It could be a school-age child coming home who hasn't eaten all day and they're in that droop where they need to get food or they're going to kill someone, figuratively speaking, bite someone's head off if you don't give them food. Or it can be even a child who's maybe coming down with a cold and is just fussy, or a child who has a diagnosed medical condition maybe bipolar or something where they have those mood swings, to where there's a biochemical component to it. So in that situation, you can ignore it all you want. If you ignore a child who needs some sleep and some food, they're not going to get less tired and they're not going to get less hungry. They're just going to get more. So that would be a real clear time. Do not ignore that kind. Figure out what's causing it and address the need as quickly as possible. The third kind is the classic attention tantrum, which is I'm just going to keep escalating my behavior until you have to pay attention to me. And so it will start small, and if you ignore it, it escalates. Okay. And the key here is that children aren't clear how to get your attention in a positive way, or maybe they've tried and it didn't work, so they feel discouraged and are resorting to negative behavior. The key here is that you do want to ignore this, but you don't want to do that as your first response. You actually want to stop and tell the child once, because if you keep, stop it, leave me alone, if you say too many things too often, you're giving it reinforcement. But if you can stop once, tell them how to get attention in a positive way, then ignore it. Instead of escalating, they'll do what you are telling them to do. And as long as what you're telling them to do is something that helps them feel that they are important, that they belong. It's not a shoo away. It's not like, why don't you go and play with something and leave me alone, which doesn't make them feel very special. But even something like if you're on the phone, them interrupting, that's a really classic attention-seeking thing. So even like, come sit on my lap and I'll scratch your back, or why don't you get a coloring book and, this is something we can do quietly. Even things like that would be something that then if you ignore it, rather than escalating, they'll just go and do what you ask them to do.
Right.
So that's the third out of the 4. The final type of tantrum is a power tantrum. So this would be, I don't get what I want, so I'm going to throw a tantrum. And the longer you hold out, the worse I'm going to get, until you finally give in. And then I've gotten reinforcement to always escalate to at least that point the next time. So the key for that is obviously don't give in. But instead, figure out what's your bottom line and give the child some choices. So this would be a really important one not to give a payoff to. So if I'm not going to get what I want, so therefore I'm going to throw the tantrum. Usually you want your rule of thumb to be, if you throw the tantrum, it's a definite no. Like there's no way you're going to get what you want. Here, if you want this, let's say you want a cookie. Well, if you're hungry, you could have this or that. You could have an apple or a carrot instead. Instead of a, pop, You can have something healthy or soda. I think everywhere else but where I live, everybody says soda. So
Right.
soda pop. Well, that's not healthy, but you could have this or that, both of which are healthy. So choices within limits are your key for your power tantrums.
All right. Wow. Very interesting. Thinking about the different types of tantrums. So tell us, for the parents watching and maybe teachers in the classroom, are there things that they can do to prevent these tantrums from even starting in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think the biggest thing is to just really be present. And I think this is where mindfulness really comes in. Mindfulness is a really big key to preventing tantrums, because if you're fully present in the moment, you might notice that your child is hungry or tired, or that presentness would definitely prevent the attention-seeking kinds of tantrums. So just kind of being present during your everyday activities, it helps us stay calmer, it helps them stay calmer. And anytime you're giving your full attention, it helps. The other big trigger is that we have a tendency in this whole global community of the world to be really rushed and pressured. And so that, come on, we got to get out of the door now. Or, come on, we've got to rush by the. So we're always in such a hurry. And that pressure, that pushing and kind of ignoring what the child's trying to say or what they need can create a tantrum where there doesn't need to be, because we're just not taking things in that little bit of a slower pace. So allowing time and being present are two really big things to notice in terms of preventing them.
Yeah. And our own reactions obviously must have an effect as well. So what's the best way to respond when this is going on?
Again, mindfulness is everything. So, and it's really hard. Science, there have been some recent studies in tantrums that kind of see a pattern that when tantrums are starting to wind up, there's this mixture of anger and sadness that starts to kind of peak. And during that time, when you see the escalation starting, if you can acknowledge feelings at the very beginning of that, sometimes that will be enough to de-escalate the situation. You're becoming present. They're getting that attention in a positive way, and they don't have to escalate. So acknowledging feelings is one key thing. And again, we've got to stay calm, right? And then, so we'll do kind of A, B, C, D. So A, acknowledge the child's feelings. B, breathe. Like they say that as it escalates, sometimes there's not a lot you can do besides acknowledging feelings until it hits this peak. And once it hits the peak and it starts to go on the downside, then the anger dissipates and then it's sadness and they want comforting. So if we can kind of breathe, not, for example, my 5.5-year-old granddaughter, I was taking her for the morning. They were on a delay, so her mom could go teach school. And I am fortunate. I have a flexible schedule. So I was watching her for a while, and she was just got out of bed. She was not happy going with me. She wanted to be with mom. And she's, I hate this, and I don't want to do this. And I'm trying to get in her car seat. And she's like, I hate this. I'm like, she says, stop it. And I said, let's both just stop. Let's just stop. Let's take a breath and calm down. It's only a few minutes to my house. And we were quiet for a few minutes. And then I came upon this intersection I don't like. And I just made a comment to myself. But then she started talking, and I don't think she stopped talking for the next 2 hours. Right. And by the end of it, she's blowing me kisses as she gets on the bus. Right. So there's that time where I think too often we try to talk logically to children while they're having a tantrum, and the anger and stress and sadness is so overwhelming, they can't have a logical conversation. So I think it goes in one ear and out the other. So comforting them without rewarding, and that's a tricky balance. It's like you want to let them know you care, but you don't want to give undue attention that's like a reward. So there's kind of a sweet spot in there of acknowledge the feelings, breathe, show compassion, C would be compassion, and then decide, as it's starting to come down, what is the core of this? Is it the medical? Is it frustration? Is it attention? Is it power? And then trying to resolve the core issue. And if you do that, not only does it dissipate that tantrum, but then you have a success for next time. They don't have to necessarily resort to the tantrum to get what they want.
Right. Yeah, great tips there. What about Jody, when your child has a temper tantrum in public, the checkout line.
I know. Oh, and isn't that worse? I know. And you know, that's the hardest part, because on the one hand, sometimes we care about what other people think, and it's easy to say don't care about what other people think, but I think to some extent we all do.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you kind of want to care about what other people not so much think, but if it's disrupting the entire store, like, you also kind of have a responsibility to not, you know, have your child running around pulling things off of shelves either, you know. So there, again, we're talking about kind of that balanced approach. So I think the first thing is to try. Here's what I often would do is, on the one hand, I would tune out everyone and imagine no one was looking, just so I could focus and deal with things in the most appropriate way I knew how. Yeah. But on the other hand, I almost imagined that I was on TV and that everyone was looking, so that it would cause me to kind of rise to my highest good. Especially being a parenting instructor, and back when my kids were young, I was on TV a lot, and I'd be in public, and literally people would watch how I parented. Yeah, they literally would watch how I parented my children. So it's if people are watching, basically, you try to do your best. I think most people, when they see this, they've been there, they've done that, they understand, they have compassion for parents. I don't think that people mind so much that your child's having a tantrum. It's how we handle it. Exactly. If we're abusive, it's going to upset people. And if we do nothing, it's going to upset people. Yeah. So if we can address it as calmly and respectfully as we can. And I think we just have to recognize at what point we just need to exit. Right. If you have to go out, calm down, have your child come down, come back in and finish your purchase. If there's no ice cream in the cart, if you have to say to someone, I'll be back, and come back and take care of it later. So I think that you just do the best that you can and try not to worry too much about what other people think. Yeah. Do your best.
Good advice, because it happens. So earlier on, when you were telling us about the types of problems and what might cause tantrums, you mentioned that there's a system where we could learn more. So tell us about the system that you have and how people can find out more about it.
Sure. It's probably the thing that's the most different about my parenting program. Most of even everything I've said here today, you may have heard before, other than kind of, a kind of a more systematic way of identifying what's really going on underneath a behavior. So my system is called the Universal Blueprint for Parenting Success. It's something that I developed over 30 years ago. We've got 50,000 parents all around the world. We've got a 10-year-long research project with thousands of parents that it just has amazing results. Wow. It's really amazing. And it's a real blend. It's very holistic in that, yes, there's logic to it, but we also need to be in touch with our emotions. And you also are going to use your intuition. And you can also, in terms of mindfulness and spirituality. So it's very holistic. And the best way to learn it, if you just want to go to parentstoolshop.com, there's freebies there. In terms of the temper tantrums, there's two ways. You can either learn the system and then you can apply it to any situation, or you can get some of our done-for-you solutions. And the temper tantrums is part of that line of products and resources that I've got. Temper tantrums, sibling conflicts, those kinds of things, where you take a challenge and then you can kind of see how the system's applied to it. Tantrums are a really classic way of applying the system, because it shows you the three parts, which is there's three questions that you ask. That helps narrow down what type of problem it is. And you would think there's a gazillion parenting challenges, but they all fit within 5 categories. Right. So if you can learn 3 questions and figure out which of the 5 categories it is, there's 5 key tools that match up. And so it's once you learn the system, you literally can prevent or solve almost any problem. And that's not to say it's a miracle, cookie cutter thing. The way you answer the questions is specific to your child in that second, with your rules, your values. So it's a system that's completely customizable. And so both of our kids could be having a tantrum, but the way we would answer the questions might lead us to handle that tantrum in 2 completely different ways, because of the way that we answer the questions. So my gift for everyone is the Taming Temper Tantrums. It's a teleseminar that I had. And after the actual teleseminar, which it has an audio and a transcript, and it's parents, we're talking, it's the content as well as talking about it, but then you can opt in for a video challenge where I went out to YouTube and found some videos that are classic of these different kinds of tantrums that you can watch the video and then kind of practice and apply. So what kind of tantrum is this and what would be a helpful way to respond? And of course, I give you the key. So
wow,
the answer key.
That sounds awesome, Jody. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing so much information. And I think a lot of it will be new to many people, how to help your child, whether it's in the classroom or at home, by finding out what type of tantrum, the reason behind it, and then those very practical strategies that you gave us. To help us get through that situation calmly, as you said. So I think it's going to be really useful for many people. And so remember, click on the speaker link. There are links to all of Jody's Facebook page and her website, and to the free course that she mentioned, and also to her book if you're interested in learning more about that. But I just want to say thanks again, Jody, for joining us and sharing so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.